Up here again, man, security postas are especially spook to me. I'm a full-time security guard, overnight. I've been working at a facility in the middle of nowhere recently on a shift that's 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. I've heard and seen some strange things, such as just about every single door in the facility is alarm set. If you open the door without a keycard, it sets off an extremely loud alarm. However, the doors aren't locked just set by an alarm. At random points in the night, motion detecting lights will trigger in rooms I'm nowhere near. Occasionally, a door alarm will go off somewhere deep in the facility, and I'm the only one supposed to be in the entire building. Upon executing a patrol, no evidence of a person being around is found, but various sounds will be here all around me. Continuing with more stories, because why not? This particular building is a supplement manufacturing facility. Meaning, it makes those bullshit pills and bottles you'll see at the store for $20 plus. It's huge, has 2 floors, and is set into many different parts. Firstly, you have a lobby that includes a staircase, a door that heads into the manufacturing portion of the building, and a door across the room on a side wall that leads into the warehouse portion. Another opening in the lobby leads to what's considered a conference room. In this large, open room on the wall closest to the opening portion, is a large metal door with opaque glass window that leads to a test kitchen. This will come into play later on. Usually the guard, my company is cheap, the client is cheaper, so there's 1 guard per 12-hour shift, will sit in a security office/room that's pretty small in south end of the building, among the manufacturing area. But, due to the virus, and my state being an epidemic area, they have us instead out in the lobby, taking temperatures, and screening the few employees that come in. The conference room has windows on almost every wall, save for the wall that has the doorway leading to the test kitchen, and has no automatic lights. One night, I was having a hard time staying awake. Watching shit on my laptop and drinking energy drinks did nothing. We have to stay at the guard table, and I was startled by a muffled bang coming from the conference room. No door alarms were set off, and no one was in the test kitchen at any point. When I went to look, the light in the test kitchen was on, and through the opaque glass, I could vaguely see a figure standing right up against the door, standing extremely still. Looking at this gave me a feeling of fear and dread, and I couldn't stop staring at it. For the next 4 hours I was on edge, occasionally looking to see the figure still standing at the window, until around 5 a.m. when light began seeping into the facility. I went in to look at the test kitchen, and no one was in it. There simply is no way anyone could have gotten in or out of it without me hearing. Even if you have a keycard, it omits a loud beep when opening the door. Other guards have experienced the same occurrence. The light turns itself on, even though it's a manual light. Another story I have from this facility takes place back before the virus, when we had to do our foot patrols. The facility, as I mentioned, is pretty large. Completing a foot patrol, scanning buttons so they know you're not sitting on your ass and not patrolling, takes about 40 minutes if you're fast. You go to every square inch of the building before it's over. Around 2 a.m., I began my internal patrol of the building. This is around December, so it's cold as fuck. I was walking through the warehouse, and noticed it was much colder than I was used to it being, and I've been there through snow and ice. As I'm rounding a large shelf, I hear a scream that sounded very human and very brief. Once again, I'm the only person supposed to be in the facility. I quickly run around the warehouse with my flashlight looking anywhere and everywhere I can, finding nothing. After the scream, I didn't hear any running or anything at all. I cut my patrol early to go and check the camera feed in the guard office to find every single camera was unreachable. This instantly scared me, because what if something was going to head to the office and I didn't see it? I stayed in the office, paranoid, and waiting for the cameras to come back. Slowly, they began to populate again, with the warehouse cameras showing up last. I went to locate the time that I heard the scream, and looking at all of the cameras while trying to locate myself on the many cameras. There are a lot of cameras, most just pointing at walls and useless shit. I finally found myself on my patrol in the saved CCTV footage. At the time I heard the scream, I'm seen on the camera turning around startled and then running off, which right after, all of the cameras shut off. Looking through all of the cameras, I couldn't find a source for what I heard. This always freaked me out when I came back to this facility and thought about it. No other guards take this contract with this facility, and I always wondered why, seeing as how all you have to do is just watch the place, and there's no complex post-order. Just do a foot patrol and then hang out for a few hours doing whatever you want. Every time the company establishes a regular guard for the place, they ask to be reassigned less than a week after. So far, I'm the only one who's been consistent, the staff have told me. Don't have many other experiences, but felt like these ones were pretty fucking spooky and worth talking about.
There's a really good security guard story that I know I don't have a screen cap of, but which I can find in the archives and post. You might like it? Give me a bit to find it. Alright, here it is. Years ago I was a student using the GI Bill. I was older. Got a very nice work study as a security guard with the university. Most of the guards were older guys trying to get into the campus police force. Was told I would get an odd assignment because of my military background, the botany/biology department greenhouses complex. Met. Okay. Was told to read the post instructions carefully and obey them. The complex was outside radio range, before cell phones, and only one phone in the complex would work at night. The gates to the complex were opened by remote. If the gates were open, I was to leave and call the police from a truck stop miles away. If I saw anyone on the grounds as I drove in, I was to leave and call the police from the truck stop. All doors were to be shut and locked. I was to drive the car up to a side door where I could see the alarm panel. If and only if the panel confirmed all doors were shut and locked could I go in. Otherwise, leave and call the police. If the panel was all green, the first was to park the patrol car so it blocked the side entrance, it was recessed, lock the other car doors, get out, unlock the side door, lock and close the car door I had left, enter and reset the alarm. If I saw anyone at any time, I was to leave immediately and get to the car and call the cops from the truck stop. I thought the instructions were weird, but whatever. The rest of the instructions said I was to call the office every even hour from the one phone, pretty common. Since they did all sorts of experiments, if a greenhouse had a sign on it, I was to not enter it. I was to not leave the building except to flee or at the end of my shift. No one except the police or guards I personally knew were from the group could be let in. I cover this place on a 10-hour shift from 10 p.m. until 8 a.m. Friday sun nights. The place is big and sprawling with dozens of greenhouses connected by doors or almost tunnels in a sort of maze. Only the roofs are clear glass, the sides are this odd translucent plastic stuff you can almost see through. Also has a research office/lab building that is fucking freaky as hell. All sorts of machines humming and clicking, and all the east-west corridors have mirrors at the end, so as I walk around I keep catching movement out of the corner of my eye. Luckily I just have to check the labs at the very beginning and end to make sure the rooms are locked and lock them if they are not. Rest of the time I am just supposed to wander around the greenhouses and make sure there are no fires or leaks. In the middle of the greenhouses is a big geodesic dome-heated greenhouse. It is amazing. It has trees, grass, flowers, a little waterfall and pond water feature. There are a few birds that got inside there, a couple frogs, and even crickets. By the third week I am in the habit of eating my lunch sitting by the little pond. I remember very clearly the third weekend it started snowing, hard, and I sat in the dome eating a chicken salad sandwich watching the snow as I listened to crickets. I had no idea why the instructions were so grim/extreme. The next weekend, though, something happened. I finished my shift, got my stuff together, and set the alarm so I had 2 minutes to leave. I left, shut the locked door, unlocked the car, got in, etc. just like the instructions, and started to leave. As I backed up I saw tracks in the snow. It was still pretty dark and the lights from the exterior weren't the best, but it looked like footprints in the snow. Like someone had walked around the outside of the car trying to get past it to the door. I looked around but didn't see anyone. The tracks looked like they came from the edge of the fence, straight to the car, back and forth 10 or 12 times, then off to circle the greenhouses. The light was bad, but the footprints looked like they were of bare feet. I got the hell out of there. By the time I got to the truck stop, though, I had calmed down and figured, I hadn't actually seen anyone. And with the gate closed, etc. It might have just been my supervisor checking to see if I was doing my job right. I didn't want the hassle of the cops. But when I got to the office, I told my supervisor and the manager what I had seen and explained why I didn't call. They were real still, asked if I was okay, and told me that if it happened again I was to call the cops. Couple days later my supervisor calls me on a day off and asks me to grab a beer with him. Workplace bonding, sure. Meet him that evening, have a few beers. He is obviously here for serious business. I'm worried I am being downsized or something. Finally he starts to tell me the story about botany, what we called the location. About 12 years before the uni stopped letting people work in the building after dark. Insurance reasons, they said. The rumor was people kept seeing and hearing odd things at night. After a huge leak the uni put security in the building full time about 8 years before. Then 6 years before a guard vanished. Now, guys who work in security quit by not showing up all the time. And sometimes they quit by just leaving work. But they don't leave behind the car that got them there and their stuff in the building, usually. The new guard talked about hearing noises outside, and tapping on windows, and footprints in the snow. Then he quit because he wouldn't go back. Then 2 years later another guard vanished, left behind a patrol car, his keys, and a wife. The uni didn't want to spend the money for 2 guards and it was so far away that the supervisors couldn't visit all the time, so they came up with strict rules. The new guards would last a month or 2, then the tapping and noises and stuff would scare them off. Then 2 years before I started a guard died. He was found outside one of the emergency exits, seemingly beaten to death. They figure he was new, heard the noises, and went to check it out. Since then they had rotated guys through a few weeks at a time, but everyone who knew the story thought botany was a punishment assignment. But for 2 years no one had seen or heard odd things. So when I started, a combat vet, they figured they'd put me out there. Then I saw footprints. He was so serious I didn't have the heart to ask if he was fucking with me, so I called other guys from the office. They all knew the story, all swore it was true. Some talked about seeing shadows through the greenhouse walls, or hearing tapping at the windows of the lab offices as they walked past, or finding their stuff moved that they left behind when they patrolled. So I called the work-study office and took a different position. Fast forward 5 years, I've got my degree. Having lunch when boom. My old supervisor walks in. He's a cop, now, with the city, not the uni. I say hi, we catch up a little. After about 10 minutes apologize for quitting with no notice. He got real still. Said it was okay, they hired a new guy right away and they only patrolled botany for about 2 more months, then the uni decided to not patrol it anymore, they just installed a bunch of machinery to shut off the water if there was a leak. Said I should have stayed. No, Anon. They installed all that stuff for a reason. We put the new guy out there on botany. The 3rd weekend he didn't come back to the office, so we went out there. The alarms were still on, the car was parked where it was supposed to be, everything looked like it should. But he wasn't there. All we found was his lunch in the dome, by the pond. Here's another one I like about a weird disappearance. Reminds me of a Twilight Zone episode. I've had multiple conversations with a retired attorney regarding an unusual case that he worked. With his permission I'm sharing the details of that case, although he's asked me not to reveal his name for obvious reasons, so I'll just refer to him as Michael. Michael has actually given me permission to mention that at the time of this incident, he had a private practice with several offices in the Baltimore/Washington, D.C. metro area. He also provided pro bono legal services for the state of Maryland, mainly representing clients with mental disabilities. Below is a statement that I took from him. Michael's statement. In June 1992, I was assigned a pro bono case/client who was being housed, by court order, in one of the state hospitals located in the metro Baltimore area. I interviewed the client at the state hospital facility. I informed him that he was facing a weapon possession charge. A vintage Marlin Derringer handgun and ammunition were found in his pants pocket, and other local vagrancy violations. The client told me that he went by the name Morris Winthrop. He stated that he was from New Jersey and lived most of his life in New York City. The file showed that there was no record of him residing in the state of Maryland. When arrested, Morris wore a high-collar white shirt and a brown frock coat and pants. I examined the clothes. Later I would discover that these were very similar to Victorian-era men's clothing from the 1870 to 1880s. He also possessed a silver metal case, similar to a cigarette case. Inside the case was a square piece of black-colored material that resembled hard plastic. He was allowed to retain this object while at the facility. Morris looked to be in his early 30s, though there was no hair or stubble on his face, just thin eyebrows. He had wispy blonde hair and a very pale complexion. The eyes were very deep blue, almost violet in color. During the interview, he would look directly at me and smile. He answered very few questions other than his name, that he was living in New York City and that he didn't know how he arrived in Baltimore. The physician at the hospital stated that he may be suffering from shock and that there may be some memory loss. I didn't get that impression while in Morris' presence. It seemed to me that he knew exactly what was transpiring. To this day, I still do not know why I felt that way. At the end of the interview, I told him that he was being held at the facility under court order and that I would seek a hearing date. Morris' reply to me was, "Thank you for your service. I will contact you, I promise." The next day I was contacted by the Baltimore County State Attorney's Office and informed that my services were no longer needed in this case. No further information was provided. I contacted the physician who was treating Morris. He stated that Morris was no longer at the facility. I asked where he was taken and told that I would need to contact the state attorney's office. For almost 2 years, no official information was available in regards to Morris. Then, in 1994, I was approached by an attendant who had worked at the state hospital during Morris' brief stay. I was told that Morris had suddenly disappeared from the ward after his late meal. There was a thorough search conducted without results. Morris' clothes were retained by the state attorney's office. All other items, including the silver metal case, were missing. I have never found out where the weapon was stored, though I assume it is at state police headquarters. Pick-related is the same style as Morris' gun. At that time, I conducted a private search for Morris Winthrop. I hired a private investigator who found very little information other than that a single 32-year-old man named Morris Winthrop had resided in New York City in 1877, until he went missing without a trace. All his property, in Manhattan, had been left behind. The police found no evidence of foul play. After 19 years, I never found another reference to Morris Winthrop. This has become a bit of an obsession for me. I have hired other private investigators over the years but nothing has been found. I would have preferred more information but Michael is quite wary of how others would interpret his investigation into Morris' identity and deposition. He asked me not to conduct a private inquiry. It seems his long-term investigation has ruffled the feathers of a few local and state officials over the years. I asked Michael what he thought of time travel as a possible explanation. He responded by musing, "If Morris was a time traveler, I wonder if he'll contact me as promised." Here's another one I kinda like. A guy recalling his father shooting an alien gray. In 1986, my dad and his sister owned a cattle ranch in northern Puerto Rico. One morning, after finding several head of cattle mutilated under strange circumstances, Dad decided to guard the ranch during the night armed with a rifle, along with myself, I was 15 at the time, and 2 of his friends. A few nights later we noticed movement about 100 meters east of us. There were 5 short grayish beings with very large heads emerging from the ravine and approaching the cattle. The beings quickly entered one of the pens and proceeded to float a calf out. The floating calf was very close to the ground and the beings walked alongside it in a shuffling manner. At that point, Dad and his friends began firing at the creatures. One of the beings seemed to be hit and fell to the ground shrieking loudly. The calf also fell to the ground while the other beings assisted their wounded companion who was writhing in obvious pain. The men fired again on the beings who then ran quickly into the woods leaving the injured being behind. The wounded being attempted to run away but was shot in the back by my dad's friend. It lay silently on the ground dying. My dad then struck it on the head with the rifle butt caving in the top of the head. It died very shortly thereafter. Pictures of the dead alien being were taken and hidden away. My dad preserved the body in a large jar filled with alcohol and formaldehyde. He stored it in the cellar of our home and told me to never mention it to my mother and siblings. I remember seeing it several more times after the incident. In 1999, my dad suddenly passed away. His friends think he was killed by the beings since he disappeared for several days before his burned body was found in a remote area. I do feel that my dad's death was related to the beings we witnessed that strange night. The body of the being is supposedly being kept by one of my dad's friends who fears the local and US authorities would somehow prosecute him for his involvement in killing it. I now live in Texas and, honestly, I hope I never see that body again, though I do believe it should be disclosed that it exists. JG. Another one I found interesting. Not sure if anyone cares. But I wanna bump this thread. This event took place in late 2017, near Winter Park, Colorado at a family friend's cabin. The cabin is in a fairly remote place with few houses around. My family had spent the day sledding and came back to the cabin in the early evening. My parents and their friends were playing board games downstairs while my 3 siblings and their 2 friends were upstairs playing. So at some point my mom notices that my younger sister isn't playing with the rest of the kids and asks my other sister where she is. She said that she had gone into her room to listen to music, so my mother thought nothing of it. An hour or so goes by and my mom still hasn't heard or seen my sister, which was unusual as she generally wouldn't pass up time to play with her friends. So my mom checks the room to find that she was not there. Immediately my mom goes into a panic and starts screaming her name. Everyone in the house starts searching all of the rooms in the house, but they can't find her anywhere. My mom then singles out my other sister and asks her why she had lied about my sister's whereabouts. She claims she was being honest and that she had been listening to music. It's been about 2 hours since anyone has seen my sister. My mom goes outside to see if she can find her. Upon going outside, my mom tells me about the most horrifying thing she's ever seen. My sister is inside our car with her face plastered to the window, wide-eyed, screaming. My mom said it was like a horror movie. Everyone had assumed she had somehow locked herself in the car, not sure how a very intelligent 10-year-old girl would do that. Upon opening the door to the car and getting my sister out, my mom notices that she is not behaving normally and appears to be in some kind of trance. They walk her inside and begin asking her questions about what had happened, but she doesn't respond to anything. She remains in this trance state for maybe an hour or 2, so my mother gives up and puts her to bed. In the morning my sister appeared to be acting somewhat normal, but seemed to be shaken up. My mother then asks her how she ended up in the car, but she doesn't remember. She said she only remembered one thing. As she was locked in the car, she saw a man dressed all in black approach her. She said she was terrified and tried to get out of the car. Then the man in black came closer and told her that he would let her out, but she would have to do something for him. He held a black rose up to the window and told her to come out so he could give it to her. After this my sister didn't remember anything. After hearing the story, my mom went outside to look around the car. To her amazement, she saw a trail of footsteps going from the car out past the house into the surrounding forest. No one had been playing or walking around that area before then according to my mom, so she seemed very disturbed about the tracks. We still don't know what to think of this, but my mother said that the look on my sister's face in the car was sincerely terrifying. I'm not sure what actually happened that night. If I'm not wrong, Colorado is also a hotspot for missing 411 cases. I'm thankful my sister didn't become one of them, but maybe she saw something similar to what others have seen before their disappearance.